paradrama tales.
On Christmas night, my pregnant wife was glowing, until her best friend smirked at her belly and joked, "If you two weren't together, I'd have made a baby with him." My wife froze. It wasn't just a joke. A line was crossed and I wasn't staying silent. For a long time, it really did feel like a dream. My wife and I had been together for 5 years, married for 2, and when we found out we were expecting our first child, everything just fell into place. We cried, we laughed, we painted the nursery. She started humming lullabies when she cooked dinner, and I caught myself staring at her belly like it was made of light. It was the kind of joy that crept into your chest slowly and never let go. We'd always been a solid team, open, honest, grounded. She was my best friend, and I thought I was hers. I knew she came as a package deal with Lena, her childhood best friend. They grew up together, shared everything. Lena was always around vacations, birthdays, our wedding. She was the maid of honor, the type who knew every inside joke and every heartbreak my wife ever had. And honestly, I didn't mind. At first, Lena felt like extended family. Sure, she had a bold personality, playful, flirty, in a kind of push-the-line way, but I figured that was just her style. She'd call me Mr. Good Husband and wink when my wife wasn't looking. Sometimes it made me uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to harmless teasing. My wife always brushed it off. "That's just Lena. She jokes like that." And I believed her, because everything else in our life felt right. I never imagined that the person who once helped zip my wife into her wedding dress would one day say she wanted to unzip our life completely. But I should have known. Sometimes cracks don't appear. Overnight they show up slowly, in offhand comments, quiet glances, little moments that don't feel quite right. And then one night, when you're finally relaxed enough to believe you're safe, someone steps across a line so clearly drawn, you're left wondering if it was ever really invisible to them at all. That line came on Christmas night, and nothing after it would feel perfect again. Christmas night had always been special for us, just the two of us, soft music, playing lights low, a quiet dinner before the chaos of visiting family. But that year we decided to invite Lena. My wife thought it would be nice to include her, especially since Lena's family was out of town. I agreed it was the season of giving after all, so I set an extra plate, opened a bottle of wine, and tried to make it feel warm and welcoming. At first, everything was lighthearted. We talked about baby names, future travel plans, things that made my wife's eyes sparkle. Lena had already had a couple glasses of wine, and she was laughing louder than usual, tossing compliments my way like confetti. "You're going to be such a good dad," she said, raising her glass toward me. "Your kid's going to be smart, handsome, and sensitive just like you." I smiled politely, trying not to let it get weird. But there was something in the way she looked at me, too long, too soft, that made my skin crawl just a little. Still, I said nothing. My wife shifted in her chair, noticeably stiffening, but tried to laugh it off. Lena had always flirted like that, right? Then it happened. Lena turned toward my wife, leaned in close, and with that same tipsy grin said, "If you two weren't together, I would have totally made a baby with him. Honestly, you should name the baby after him twice, one for you, one for me." And then she laughed, like it was hilarious, like she hadn't just poured poison over the one night that was supposed to be sacred. My wife blinked, stunned. I looked straight at Lena. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile, because in that moment, I didn't hear a joke. I heard a confession. And whether she meant it or not, whether it was wine or wishful thinking, she crossed a line I never thought she'd even approach. And I knew I couldn't let it slide, not with my wife beside me, not with my child on the way, not under my roof. The room went silent, but not for long. Lena let out a laugh, high-pitched, nervous, like she was trying to swallow the weight of her own words. "I'm just messing around," she said, waving her hand as if she could shoo away the discomfort like smoke. "Come on, it's a joke." But no one was laughing. My wife forced a small smile, the kind you wear when you're embarrassed for someone else. She looked down at her plate, cheeks flushed not with joy, but with something closer to shame. And that was it for me. I stood up. "That's not funny, Lena," I said, my voice calm but solid. "You're out of line." She blinked. "What you need to leave." The table shifted with the weight of my words. Lena's mouth opened then closed as if she was searching for a comeback that would undo what just happened. "Seriously," she said, "you're kicking me out?" Over a joke, I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I simply repeated myself. "You're not welcome in this house anymore." She stood up flustered and looked at my wife like she expected backup. But my wife didn't move, didn't speak. She just sat there torn between two people she thought she could keep in the same room forever. Lena grabbed her coat and left muttering something under her breath I didn't bother to catch. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. I turned to my wife expecting maybe relief, maybe even agreement. But what I got was resistance. She looked at me with wounded eyes and whispered, "You didn't have to do that." But I did, not out of pride, not out of anger. But because some boundaries, if you don't draw them yourself, someone else will keep crossing them, again and again. And when you're about to be a father, you learn quickly your home is your fortress. And your job isn't just to protect it from violence or storms. You protect it from the people who think your life is a game they get to play with, even if they've known your wife since childhood. I've never had a problem with humor. In fact, I love a good joke. I grew up in a family where sarcasm was a love language, where teasing meant comfort, where laughter stitched us together. But even as a kid, I learned something important. Jokes have boundaries. They're not supposed to humiliate. They're not meant to mask desire. And they definitely aren't supposed to make your pregnant wife feel like she's competing for her husband's loyalty in her own home. That night after Lena left, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. "You should name the baby after him twice. One for you, one for me." Everyone kept saying it was a joke, but there's something about a certain kind of joke that doesn't feel like one. It feels like a truth. Someone's too afraid to say without a laugh attached. Psychologists call it benign violation theory. The idea that humor often comes from crossing a boundary in a way that feels safe. But here's the thing. If the person on the receiving end doesn't feel safe, then it's not a joke. It's a threat wrapped in laughter. What Lena said wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a test. A way to see how far she could go, how much she could say without consequences. And when I told her to leave, I wasn't punishing her. I was answering the question she didn't realize she was asking. Will you let me say this and stay? No, I won't. I won't let anyone, friend, family, or otherwise sexualize me in front of my wife, especially not when we're about to bring a child into the world. I won't laugh off disrespect just because it's delivered with a smile. Because here's the truth. No one wants to admit some people use jokes like weapons. They hide behind humor so they never have to take responsibility for how much it hurts. But just because you're laughing doesn't mean you're not cutting someone else open. And in my house, that ends with me. I thought what I did that night would bring us closer. I really did. I thought standing up for her, for us, would make her feel protected, respected, maybe even proud. But instead, I found myself on the other side of a wall I didn't know existed. The morning after I sat down across from my wife at the kitchen table, her eyes were tired, swollen from a night of silence. I reached for her hand gently and said, "I did what I thought was right." She pulled away. "You embarrassed her," she whispered. That hit me like a punch I never saw coming. "Embarrassed her?" I asked. "She embarrassed you. She said she wanted a baby with your husband while you're carrying his child." My wife looked down. She was drunk. She didn't mean it. "You made it into something it wasn't." That was the moment I realized we weren't talking about Lena anymore. We were talking about loyalty, about who she felt more responsible for in that moment. Me, her husband, and the father of her child. Or the friend who'd been in her life since braces and broken hearts. She wasn't defending Lena because she thought Lena was right. She was defending Lena because losing her felt scarier than standing with me. And I get it, sort of. Lifelong friendships are powerful. They're layered with memories, grief, and a sense of identity. But that doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't excuse silence when someone disrespects your marriage and calls it a joke. I didn't need her to burn the bridge. I just needed her to stand on my side of it. Instead, she stood in the middle and left me standing alone. And suddenly the house we had built together didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a courtroom where I was pleading my case and the verdict was still out. That's when I knew I hadn't just drawn a boundary with Lena. I'd drawn a line in my marriage too. And now I had to wait and see if my wife would step across it. Or walk the other way. I didn't expect a parade for what I did. I didn't need applause or validation. But I also didn't expect what came next. A few days after Christmas, her sister called, then her cousin, then her mom. It was like a slow-moving avalanche of disapproval, each conversation starting the same way. We heard about what happened, and ending with some version of you overreacted. One by one, they lined up to tell me how Lena was obviously joking, how I'd humiliated her, how I'd ruined the holiday vibe. No one asked how I felt watching my pregnant wife sit in silence while her best friend sexualized me across the dinner table. No one asked how it felt to be laughed at when all I wanted was to protect the sanctity of our home. Her mom said Lena's like family. You don't just cut people off like that over a stupid joke. But that's the thing, Lena may be like family to them, but she's not family to me. My family is the woman I married and the child growing inside her. And I'm not going to pretend someone respects us just because they've known us the longest. I started to feel like I'd stepped into a play where everyone had rehearsed their lines, except me. I was cast as the villain in a story I didn't write. Worse yet, my wife didn't defend me. She didn't say I was right. She didn't say I was wrong either. She just let the wave crash over me without ever reaching for my hand. And I couldn't help but wonder, when did protecting your marriage become more controversial than protecting your friends? When did speaking up become the thing people whisper about? The backlash didn't make me regret what I did. It made me realize how rare it is to be surrounded by people who know how to choose peace over politeness, integrity over image, boundaries over brunch invites. I wasn't looking to start a war, but if standing up for my wife and child made me the bad guy, then maybe it's time we rethink who we call good. Every time I feel myself questioning what I did, replaying it in my head, wondering if maybe I really was too harsh, I walk into the nursery. It's not finished yet. The crib is still in the box. The walls are bare, just primer. But there's a folded blanket on the rocking chair my wife picked out, and a tiny pair of socks sitting on the dresser no bigger than my thumb. And I remember this is who I'm fighting for, not just for me, not even just for my wife, but for the child who's going to open their eyes in this world and learn slowly, quietly what love looks like, what respect sounds like, what it means to feel safe in a room with the people who claim to love you. Because here's the truth. People don't always want to admit children learn by watching, not just what we teach them, but what we tolerate. And I refuse to let my child grow up in a home where disrespect is disguised as humor, where silence is expected in the name of keeping the peace. People say it's just one moment, just one comment, just one bad night. But our child will inherit the culture of our marriage. And if I allow that kind of boundary crossing now, what will I be teaching them later? That some people are allowed to make others uncomfortable because they're family. That saying nothing is easier than doing the right thing. No, not in this house. I want my child to grow up seeing a father who stood firm, not just when it was easy, but when it was uncomfortable, when people rolled their eyes, when even the people closest to him didn't understand. One day when they ask me what kind of man I am, I want to be able to point to that moment and say, I chose you. I chose your mother. I chose our peace over their approval. Because some fights aren't about proving a point. They're about protecting what you love before someone convinces you it's not worth it. There's a moment in every relationship, every marriage, where you realize love isn't measured by how easy things are. It's measured by what you're willing to stand for, and who's willing to stand with you. In the days that followed the fallout, the house got quieter. My wife and I still spoke, but it wasn't the same. Conversations felt like walking on eggshells. She avoided the subject like ignoring it might make it go away. I didn't press her, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to give her space to choose. See, I wasn't asking her to cut Lena out of her life. I wasn't issuing ultimatums or forcing her to pick sides. I was just asking her to choose us, to choose respect, to look at the boundary I set, not as a punishment, but as a promise that I would protect this family, even if I had to do it alone. But here's the thing. They don't tell you. Choosing respect can be lonely. I got cold looks, passive-aggressive texts, a long message from one of her cousins about how real men don't make women choose. But the truth is, I wasn't making anyone choose. I had already chosen. I chose to be a husband who doesn't laugh along when someone flirts with him in front of his wife. I chose to be a father who models what it looks like to say enough when the world says it's not that big a deal. I chose dignity even when it meant sitting by myself at the dinner table. Would I have loved for my wife to stand beside me without hesitation? Of course, but I also know some people need time to untangle loyalty from love, habit from truth. All I could do was hold the line and hope she'd meet me there, because sometimes standing alone isn't the loneliest thing you can do. Sometimes the loneliest thing is sitting beside someone who sees the hurt and still doesn't say your name. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe my wife will come to see what I was trying to protect. Maybe she won't. But I do know this. I can look my child in the eye one day and say, I did not stay silent when it mattered, Because real love doesn't just whisper sweet things when times are easy. It speaks up when things get uncomfortable. It draws lines even if they upset the room. It protects what is sacred not out of fear, but out of devotion. This story was never about one dinner or one joke. It was about something deeper, the invisible thread that either strengthens or unravels a marriage respect. If you've ever been in a moment where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity, I hope you chose yourself. And if you didn't, then I hope you find the courage to do it next time. Because your silence might make people more comfortable, but your truth, that will make you free. If this story resonated with you, I hope you'll stay. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the quiet decisions, the ones made not with noise, but with conviction. And if someone you love is standing alone for the right reasons, share this with them. Sometimes all someone needs is to hear, "You're not wrong for wanting better."